One of the most prevalent themes in Avatar: The Last Airbender is the theme of fall and redemption. Stories of tragic fall and eventual redemption is embedded into the story's world building and its characters. It is seen in the Fire Nation's fall from grace, as it attacks the world, and in Aang's failure in being there when the world needed him the most. A lot of characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender carries this theme, the theme of wrong decisions, failed actions, of guilt and regret from letting others down. The Prince of the Fire Nation, Zuko, is the embodiment of the redemption arc. He is a man of duality, a man whom there is always two sides to. He's both prince and exile, just as he's both villain and hero. Zuko is a man of two destinies, a man capable of both good and evil. Just as Avatar: The Last Airbender is almost universally praised as one of the best shows ever made, so too is Prince Zuko praised for having one of the best redemption arcs ever written. A redemption arc is a specific character arc, in which the character has committed vile acts in the past, and throughout the story they must understand the error of their ways and atone for their sins. Unlike a standard positive change arc, where the hero most likely corrects a single character flaw, such as Han Solo's transformation from an apathetic smuggler who only works for money, to a heroic figure who fights for what is right. The flaw being corrected in the redemption arc is typically much deeper and much darker, as it isn't just a single trait but their whole personality that comes into question. There is something intrinsically primal and enticing about redemption arcs. It is probably why we see them so often in our favorite stories. Or perhaps it could be that it is because of the redemption arcs themselves that those stories become our favorite. The redemption arc appears in many stories, older stories like Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and more modern stories like A Game of Thrones, Harry Potter and Star Wars, to name a few. It seems to me that those who undergo the most memorable redemption arcs start out as villains of their respective stories, as would be the case of Prince Zuko, or Darth Vader, Severus Snape, and Jaime Lannister. The villain redemption arc offers the biggest change, going from evil to good, and because of this, their arc provides the best contrast for us to appreciate the hardships that they overcome. Jaime Lannister is a fallen knight who has forsaken his vows. Darth Vader is a former Jedi who paved the way for the evil Empire to rise and take over. And Snape supported Voldemort until it led to the death of the only person he ever loved. They're all characters of anger and cynicism and disappointments in themselves and in the world around them, and they all have a lot to answer for. We sympathize with those who succeed against all odds, those who grow despite impossible adversity. And as a rule of thumb, the more the character struggles, the more we care about them. They're the worst the story has to offer, but then as time goes on, a light is shone upon them, revealing cracks of humanity buried beneath a facade of evil. As redemption arcs are mostly reserved for characters with a deeper and darker backstory, these characters often carry a scar to highlight this fact, a visual representation of their disquieting past. These are not small and aesthetically pleasing scars that can conveniently be covered with hair, such as Harry Potter's lightning scar, but instead they're viscerally brutal and ugly, and the most effective scars become an extension of the bearer's personality. Zuko's scar tells you everything you need to know about him in simple yet powerful terms. How he is both literally and metaphorically damaged. And the location of his scar is no coincidence either. It could have covered the entirety of his face, but it doesn't. It leaves half the face untouched and the other damaged beyond repair. Duality is written on Zuko's face. Zuko's scar covers one of his eyes, suitable for one who has lost his way in the world and is now blinded to the right path forward. If Zuko wasn't meant for redemption, he probably would have been designed with both eyes burned and damaged. The fact that he still has one good eye left, one side untouched, visually conveys the notion that he's not yet fully blinded to the world around him, and that he still has a chance of finding his way and, well, finding his redemption. Zuko's scar is a constant reminder of the two sides that reside within him. A reminder of the boy who he once was, and the monster who he has now become, just as it is a reminder of the Fire Nation's brutality and the potential redemption of its people. In its broadest terms, it is a reminder of the good and evil that rests inside all of us. Zuko's character arc and eventual redemption stands out among his peers in its unique presentation. Most villains with redemption arcs start out as unconquerable and unbeatable evil. Jaime Lannister, for instance, is known for his unmatched skills with the sword, and Vader chokes the living daylights out of anyone who as much as looks at him the wrong way. But Zuko is different. Zuko loses almost every encounter he has, and every time he fails he gets up and tries again. This does not mean he comes off as a joke, however. He still is a clear threat, but his defeats help endear him to us, and his frustrations and failure highlights the humanity in him. Zuko struggles with never being good enough. He struggles with imperfection. I don't think he fails because he's weak or incompetent, but because he's on a mission that was never his own to begin with, a destiny imposed on him by someone else. Zuko's character arc spans all 3 seasons, and it is structured not unlike the traditional 3-act plot structure. For those unfamiliar with this structure, it can be boiled down to the following points. At the beginning of the first act, we experience the hero in his normal and everyday setting. For Zuko, this is him relentlessly chasing the Avatar, hoping that it will restore his honor. Then halfway through the first act, we have the inciting event, the call to adventure, which turns his normal world upside down and presents to the viewer a new world or worldview. At the end of the first act, he begins his journey, as he recognizes that the Fire Nation General Shao represents is not one that represents Zuko, and so he turns his back on it. At the end of the second act, he falters and nearly fails, giving into the lie that capturing the Avatar will restore his honor. And in the third act, he overcomes his inner demons, learns the truth of right and wrong, and redeems himself. This structure does fit Prince Zuko, although he does not experience an inciting event halfway through the first act that uproots his way of life, at least not in the traditional way. But what we do have is an episode which dramatically changes our perception of Prince Zuko. The episode The Storm is one of the best episodes in the entire series. In this episode, we do not just learn of Aang's past and why he feels like he needs to redeem himself, but we also learn of Zuko's past, and we learn the origin of Zuko's scar. In this episode, we see how Zuko was a normal and happy child, to the extent that is possible with Ozai as your father, and we are told that one day he spoke out against a plan presented in his father's war council, which resulted in Zuko's father Ozai challenging Zuko to a fire duel, an Agni Kai. Zuko refused to fight him, and for this reason he was burned and banished, and only upon capturing the Avatar could he return home. He lost it all that day, his people, his throne, and the perceived love of his father. This episode not only makes Zuko a vulnerable and sorrowful character, but it reveals the source of his anguish. We learn that it isn't nature but nurture which turned him bad. This revelation is present in every character. No matter how evil or wrong they are, the show insists that anyone could turn good had the circumstances been different. The irony of Zuko's past adds layers of depth to the sadness of his character, and we see how he's unlike any other redeemable villain. His backstory is not one of wrongdoing, but of harmful neglect. Zuko did the right thing and was banished for the wrong reason. Darth Vader, Jaime Lannister, and Severus Snape all had done terrible things in their past, but not Zuko. Zuko's worldview is messed up, to say the least, as a result of his traumatic childhood. Ozai made Zuko believe that wrong is right, that the war is good and just, and that Zuko's worth and honor hinges on capturing the Avatar. Ozai's neglect and failure as a father manifests itself in Zuko through his anger and rage towards those around him. Zuko is not malign in his intent, however, despite having turned into the main bad guy of the first season. When all the anger is brushed aside, Zuko is caring and forgiving, even towards his biggest enemies, as seen when he attempts to rescue General Shao from certain death. Forgiveness is a central aspect of the redemption arc, and in Avatar, every character deserving of redemption end up seeking forgiveness. Seeking forgiveness in Avatar means that you should also reach out your hand and extend forgiveness. This is a trait Zuko has in common with Aang, who always tries to forgive his enemies like Zuko and the Fire Lord Ozai. Both Shao and Ozai, however, show time and time again that they're incapable of forgiving, and so when a hand reaches out to them, they refuse to grasp it. Zuko's gradual change has him evolved from an antagonist in the first season to an anti-hero in the second season, and a protagonist in the third. As Zuko develops into an anti-hero, Azula replaces him as an antagonist from the second season and onwards. And what a character she is. Azula is Zuko's sister. She's the shadow version of Zuko, if you will, and the perfect heir to the Fire Nation in the eyes of their father. She is what Zuko could not be. Azula and Zuko are designed to be opposites. Whereas Zuko is male, she is female. Where he is scarred, she is flawless. Where Zuko is a constant failure, she is a firebending prodigy. And finally, where Zuko is redeemable, Azula is lost. Azula is the most tragic and saddest character in the entire show. She turns our understanding of flaw and perfection on its head, and in Avatar, having flaws mean that you can grow, and Azula having none hints at just how damaged she really is. Zuko has been through much, constantly struggling, constantly failing, constantly growing, but he has always had the love of his mother and of his uncle Iroh to support him when he needed it the most. As positive nurture is the key to his eventual redemption, so too is reinforced negative nurture the source of Azula's eventual fall. I said that unlike Zuko, Azula does not have a scar, but that is actually not entirely accurate. She is, in fact, just as broken, if not more, as Zuko. Azula's physical manifestation of her pain is presented to us in a more subtle way. She is flawless, constantly honing her abilities beyond what any normal person would do. When you look closer, you see that Azula's perfection is her scar. When realizing this, we begin to grasp the depth of her misery. There is no room for flaws or failures within her. Like Zuko, she yearns for her father's admiration and love, but unlike Zuko, she never learns to overcome the neglect of their father. She's always pushing herself to ever more perfection, a symbol of her scar's ever-demanding control over her. Where Zuko is seen as a failure in the eyes of his father, she's seen as a reflection of the ideal person, and for her nothing less will do. Perfection is the only way she feels she can earn her father's love, as he does not see the person behind the talent. Deep down though, she's just another human, with her own sadness, longing and desires of acceptance, which she pushes as far down as possible. As hard as it is to watch Azula's mental breakdown, it gives us a deeper perspective into just how much Zuko has grown and overcome. Azula is what Zuko would have been, had he not found his way. And Zuko is what Azula could have been, with proper parental guidance. Nature versus nurture is a theme that is often repeated within the Fire Nation. Despite having the same origins, Iroh turns out vastly different than his brother Ozai. Zuko turns out different than Azula, and the Fire Nation itself will be different and better under Zuko. Zuko's redemption is not just a story of his own transition from villain to redeemed hero, but a story of the scarred Fire Nation itself. The greater objective in Avatar: The Last Airbender was always to restore balance and peace to the world and its four nations. Zuko's scar and duality was always a reflection of the scarred duality found in his family and homeland. Zuko's redemption becomes the redemption of the Fire Nation, as he guides it to a better future. Avatar: The Last Airbender teaches us that no matter how hard you fail in life, you should never give up. And it teaches us that even the worst of us are worth a second chance. If you enjoyed this video, it would make me happy if you pressed the like button, as it helps me out a lot and helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for listening to this, and I will see you next time.